Creative Katie here. Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to create a mixed media canvas, Fantasy in Flight. And here's a sneak peek of the finished project. Lots of techniques, lots of tips coming your way. So here you see the color scheme that I'm going to be working on. I'm going to be working on a 10 by 20 canvas, and I am going to use, starting on the right hand side, turquoise, yellow, orange. I switch it out to quinacridone magenta and deep violet. I nix the bright aqua at the end. As it evolves, it kind of changes. Now, before I decide to put the paint on, I think, okay, you know what? I want some marks. I want some interest, some texture underneath. So I'm gluing down some music paper, layering it up, and I'm hoping that in the end that this is going to peek through, and it does when you look really closely. But it also adds some interesting texture, which is another purpose of doing it. Kind of wrap it around the edges because you need to treat the edges of your canvas in a similar fashion. So once that's dry, I did do some stamping with my swirl, my homemade stamp, and a Tim Holtz media stamp there, the kind of tire mark looking one, and I start applying the paint. So that is the turquoise paint, and I mix the yellow in with it when it's wet, and it kind of makes that green. So I want to work fairly quickly here and get those colors to blend. Now I start with the medium magenta here. I'm not getting the color I like, so then I grab the orange, and I want that. So I'm mixing the orange with the wet yellow. So I'm always keeping a wet edge because I want it to blend with both colors on either side of it. And I'm sticking to colors that I know when I mix them when and wet, they're not going to make mud. Yellow and orange are going to make a lighter orange. So now I'm adding the quinacridone magenta. I wanted something a little deeper, a little richer looking than the medium magenta. But again, that's just a personal choice. So I'm mixing it with the wet orange edge, and then I want some of the quinacridone magenta to show off. Now I'm keeping a wet edge on here, or I'll add more wet paint, and then I'm going to add some deep violet momentarily. And you can see how non-precise I'm just blending it. I want this to blend. I don't want a hard line where the colors meet, which is why I'm making sure that I do it wet on wet. And because I have turquoise at the other end, I thought it would be nice that turquoise would go well here. And I selected turquoise to be on the end because I know that it's going to go well, it's going to mix well with this deep violet. It kind of makes a darker blue, aquamarine typey blue. Whereas on the other side, when I mix it with yellow, it makes the green. So even though I use, 5 colors, I end up with so many more colors on my canvas. And I am painting the sides, getting a color of paint all the way around. Now you can apply this with the brush. I just find I get better blending and better effect. Now here is the layout that I'm going with. And I put these on. These are, I made a template. I got some clip art and I made a template. And a good source is either student kid art from teacher websites or from quilt or applique. You get some interesting patterns. So I cut out the templates and I'm loving, loving, loving the look of this. I've picked the same colors that were in the background, and I will put a link to the videos where I make these plaid-like gel prints. These were gel prints that I had in my stash, and I just pulled them out and threw them against my background. But I love that. But I'm thinking my original idea was to add a whole lot of stenciling and a whole lot of patterning and layers. So I pull out some stencils and I go to town. This is the Magnolia Blossom. And I'm putting this on, and I've liked doing this on my one collage sheet. I put this stencil underneath, and I really liked the effect. It didn't become as forward. So that's why I repeated it here. And I'm twisting and turning the stencil to get variety. Now this is not the final layer. This is a beginning layer, and I'm going to be adding lots of different stencils and colors. And usually I use the same colors that are on the canvas as well as white and a dark. Sometimes that's black, sometimes that's a dark blue. But right about now, it's just, and I think it's because there's so many colors in the background, I'm not exactly happy with it. And in that, it's not matching the picture in my head. And when I had the dragonflies, the collaged paper dragonflies on that background as before, I started to second guess putting the pattern on it, just keeping it plain. And sometimes that happens. You get in the middle of a project, you get a new idea, and you're not sure which road to take. This is Tile Mania, and I love this stencil. It adds such a unique effect to the background. So I'm putting this on with Prussian blue, and then I put it on with white, which I often do the same stencil in more than one color. This just reminds me of stars, and it just kind of twinkles and shines on this. So I'm going to continue adding more and more stencils using the color. But I have to be honest, in my head, I'm thinking, oh, I should not have done this. I should have just put the collage papers on earlier. This is Celebration, and I'm just using this one motif on it. So when you look at your stencils, look for those little motifs. You do not have to use the stencil exactly as the designer gave it to you. You can use bits and pieces that are going to give you some wonderful patterns. So I attempt to put gold through this, and I decide that's not giving me anything. It's not adding value to it, so I wipe it off. And you can do that with wet acrylic paint. So here is the canvas, and while I like it, some parts better than others, I don't like it for what I was going to do. So I do splatter gold on it and trying to save it. And it's at that point that I decide I'm done creating for the day. I'm going to put this aside and let the ideas gel and see if what I can do. So I was convinced that I was going to put that background aside and repaint to get this simplistic background. And then I had another idea. So the curves here, or the waves, come from the Crazy Wave stencil, which I've added onto, and I cut out of packaging. And so I'm putting the two pieces together and stenciling in between to get a wavy black line. Now this is an idea I've had for a long time, and I've never pushed through to figure out how to do it. I didn't want to risk it, but I thought, you know what? I'm questionable about this background, so I am just going to go all in. And you're going to see this wavy template that I have. Again, I have a couple other ideas for using it, so stay tuned. I'm really excited about those coming up. But that won't be till mid-August. So one thing you can do, if you're a subscriber, click on the bell and look to see if you have selected to be notified of upcoming videos. And please do that. That is something that YouTube watches to see how many people are getting notified. And every time you see that, they think the video is better and they will then share more of my videos. So click on that. What it means is you will get an email with the thumbnail of the project, and then you can decide, oh, is this something that interests me? And then you can go and click on it should you want to. So just by adding that black line on there, I'm liking this background better. And with this template, I can move it further apart or closer together. So I can make each section fatter. Now my lines aren't exactly, or the stenciling here isn't exactly perfect. There's some bleed under because it's really hard to hold it down, especially on a canvas that moves. It would work so much better on a wooden panel. But I solved that problem. So I get out my angle brush and I'm using white paint and I'm using the float acrylic technique on both sides of the black line. So what that does is it kind of cleans up a messy edge that may have seeped under, and it's also highlighting each section, and I like that effect. It just brightens it up and it's adding some detail. It's making the background a lot more interesting. So I just do one side, let it dry, I flip it over and I do more. And I do go back and I add more white once it's dry if I think it needs it. You want to avoid putting your hand in it. And when you're working on a larger canvas, you have to be more aware of that. Now I did try doing this with black. I did not like the effect. So I put it on, gave it an, experimented with it and just wiped it off very quickly. And there you can see how it's changed, how the top ones look a little different than the ones that I have not done that to yet. Now you can do this exact same process on an art journal page, but I would do it on a larger page or canvas panel. So now I get my gold in my fine line bottle and I'm putting a strip of gold down the middle of the black. Just adding some bling. And while I'm trying to be as precise as possible, I'm not freaking out if it wobbles. Because everything's acrylic underneath, should I make a big mess, I can wipe it off and start over. So now I get my collage papered dragonflies and I'm position them on. And I like how the teal blue dragonfly has risen above where the teal blue is on the background. And then the yellow orange one is risen above the yellow orange part of the background. And I'm kind of putting the dragonflies on so they're kind of swooping up. So there's some movement. The waves in the background have added some additional movement. And I'm using gel medium to glue this all down. Now the background is fairly busy, and if you go back and check where I just had the plainer background, the collage papers showed up a lot more. But I am going to be shading around these and they will pop. And as I look at it on the wall right now, I really like the final effect that I've got going on here. So while I am definitely planning to go back and do a different version with these same dragonflies with a different background and incorporating some other ideas that I have, I do like this one. And since I love dragonflies, doing another canvas with dragonflies is not going to be too much of a hardship for me. Time to buy more gel medium. So here I now have black and I am doing the float technique on top of the papers with the black. So I'm typically doing one side, letting it dry, then coming back and doing the other side. To do both sides, you will disturb the other paint and kind of mess up what you have. So it's best to do one and then come back. And you can see with the ones that I've done it on and the ones that I haven't, the difference that this makes. And I decided here not to shade on the canvas, because sometimes I do the float acrylic on the canvas part, off the papers. Sometimes I do both. Sometimes I do one. But I liked the effect that I got with just doing it on the papers. And here I am drying it so I can go back and add a second layer or finish off doing all the sides of it. But you can see how just doing that made that dragonfly step up from the background. And I continue with the other two dragonflies. I chose to do the gel prints that are plaid. They're very simple, but there is some pattern there because I didn't want too much pattern because my background has a lot of pattern in it. So I wanted more solid colors for the dragonfly. But you could do the opposite, have the wings and the dragonfly be more patterned and have the background be less. The possibilities are, just endless as your imagination. So now I grab my fine line bottle, white, and I am doing kind of faux stitching because I'm not sure if this pattern came from kids or from an applique quilting site. But I wanted that stitching to be there, and I wanted to add the white to it. Alternatively, you can do a straight line. Now I want to keep every medium that I use here permanent because I plan on varnishing this as it is a canvas. But if this was in an art journal page, I could just use a white gel pen, the Uniball Signo white or whatever, and not worry about it being permanent because I don't varnish those pages. Links to the stencils and other products that I've used can be found in the description box below. Thank you so much for shopping my Amazon store. I have close-ups of the finished project and parts of the finished project so you can really see them. You can take just one section of this, one dragonfly on a 8x10 would look absolutely lovely. You could add words to it. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you for the next video.